get started and honor your time today. Thanks for coming. I'm Kari, Seybolt-Murphy. I am one of the team leads for the Child Safety and Reunification team, and I've been at this since 2016. And I'm really proud of where we've come. So I'm going to introduce our panel. I'm going to start at the far end. We've got Megan Scottheim, who's the head of school at Montessori Country School. We've got Corinne Wolf, who is the executive director of Kidding You. Dane Fenwick, who's the director of facilities, capital projects, and sorry, I forgot the other one.
Bunch of other stuff.
Bunch of action. He's all the buildings, right? Anna Sage is the Bainbridge Island emergency manager, and she's been here for 5 years. And honestly, the partnership that we have with Cody is why we're far as long as we are. And then Scott James is the founder and board chair of Bainbridge Prepares. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Kari. What's that? Yes, so we're recording today so that all the parents and guardians that couldn't be here today can still find out what's going on. So first, thank you to Dane and to the school district for hosting us and giving us the high school theater to record this. Today we're going to be talking about natural disasters in a non-scary way, and we'll be talking about how those relate to what our community-wide effort to take care of our kids. This is a partnership that has worked on this for years now. There's 3 entities in this partnership, plus a whole lot of partners. There's a nonprofit called Bainbridge Prepares, there's a fire district, and there is a city called the City of Bainbridge Island. The 3 of us have put together a pretty unique partnership, and then we've got a lot of other entities that are also involved. Most of those leaders you're going to hear from today. So let's talk a little bit about, you're going to hear us talk about, say the word earthquake or tsunami about 900 times in the next 45 minutes. But that's a little bit of a shorthand. So, because what we have created is like a social safety net. And this is a social safety net that kicks in when first responders, when the professionals are overwhelmed. So there's a lot of times that we do not kick in automatically. Now we might get activated by those first responders, but just so that we're clear on what the Bainbridge Prepares partnership works on and what we don't work on, take a look at this slide. Now, when the pandemic happened, and the day that she closed City Hall and turned it into the Emergency Operations Center, she instantly was able to activate about, like, what, more than 60% of our teams or so, a little more than half. So Ann instantly had several hundred trained volunteers, background checked, credentialed, that she was able to stand up pretty quickly. So what we have built for earthquakes is also applicable for other types of natural disasters. So these are the 3 entities that make up that partnership, the city, the fire district, and the nonprofit. There are a lot of teams up here. We are only going to talk about one primarily today, and that is Kari's Child Safety and Family Reunification team. 2 things to note on this slide. One, note the version, 5.3. The way I keep track of versions, that means that there's been 52 previous organizational charts over the years. We're 12 years old now, and we have had a lot of changes and a lot of growth. The second thing I'll call your attention to is the staff number there in the middle. We're closing in on 750 active volunteers, people who've gone through a background check, some of you who are in this audience, and it is always growing. Now, one last thing before I turn this over to Ann. So there's a group called AIEM, this little logo you see down here on the bottom. It stands for International Association of Emergency Managers. Think of like 6,000 plus Ann Lesages, right? So these are type A, fast forward go-getters at the state or county or municipality levels. And what we've built here, the 3 entities that, and all of the volunteers up here, what we have built has been novel enough and proven useful enough that they nominated us to be the volunteer organization of the year a couple years ago. So it's an organizational model that's a little weird, but it works, and we're pretty excited about it. One last thing before I turn it over to Ann. There's a good-looking fellow in the back. If everybody could turn and look at the back. A fellow named Lauren Bass, who's my executive director, that tall, gregarious fellow there. If you can give him a high five on your way out. He and his team did all of the background, behind-the-scenes work to set up this event, both here in the theater and over in the mock Child Reunification Center, where the child care is. So thank you, Lauren. Well done. Ann, why don't you come up and talk to us a little bit about where the Child Reunification Center fits in.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. So before we start kind of diving into the Child Reunification Center, I wanted to just talk for a minute about what we call our Disaster Hub Network. And the reason why this is important is after a major earthquake, we have infrastructure that we are building up to provide resources to families on the island. And so I like to think of the Child Reunification Center as the Kids Hub for short. So it's one of many sites that those 750 volunteers are going to be supporting so that we're able to provide information and connection between everyone that's here on island when the earthquake happens or when the tsunami happens or the wildfire, whatever that might be. And so we have been diligently building out this network for the last 12 plus years. And we're at a point now where we have emergency supplies and volunteers assigned to the majority of these sites. I mean, there's still work to be done, don't get me wrong. We're not like, all right, this is done and we can move on. We need to continue to recruit more volunteers, refine these plans and processes so that we're able to stand these up. But the idea is, earthquake happens, volunteers will go and assess each of these sites, make sure that they're structurally sound, make sure that we can activate and open these hubs, and then in part of that, we're talking about the Child Reunification Center as well. So if you have questions on disaster hubs, come chat with me afterwards, or you can ask it when we open it up for questions and answers. But there's a lot of information. I'm going to refer to two different websites really quick. So bainbridgeprepares.org and then bainbridgelaw.gov. So both Bainbridge Prepares and the City of Bainbridge Island, we have a lot of information. Thank you, Kari is holding up. There's a really great resource document in your packet called the Resource for Residents that lists a lot of those sites as well. So just a lot of good reference material. So when we start diving a little bit deeper into what we call our 72-hour plan and the plan for child reunification, just know that there's all of this other work being done to help everyone else on the island. And then the last thing I'll say on this, that previous org chart that Scott pulled up with all of those different teams. So this lower blue box that says emergency response team, almost every single one of those teams will be activated in support of the hub network. So if you have a pet, we have a plan for how do we handle animals on the island. If you have someone that has an access and functional need, we have plans in place to help individuals who have access and functional needs. You have someone in your family, or we have tourists on the island that don't speak English as their first language. We have a list of volunteers that are fluent in other languages. So we're really trying to think holistically about anyone that lives on the island, works on the island, spends time on the island, or might just be stuck here when the disaster strikes. And so this goes along with what FEMA calls the whole community approach to disaster preparedness. And that's really what we've been striving for as we've been building out this network. And I will put in a plug, if any of you are interested in volunteering and you aren't already volunteer, come see me afterwards and we will get you signed up. Okay, so the 72-hour plan for schools, childcare, after-school programs on the island. So Kari mentioned she's been the lead for this team since 2016. So the child safety team includes representatives from public and private schools on the island, daycare, and after-school programs on the island as well. So when we have been working on this plan and working through this process, it's thinking about what happens when the earthquake strikes while your kids are in school, what happens if the earthquake strikes while your kids are at daycare, And what happens if an earthquake strikes when your kids are in after school or summer programs, right? So the idea is we have worked with all of these partners to think through what that looks like. So the first 48 hours, essentially, each individual school and daycare and after-school program is responsible for the kids that are in their charge, that are in their care. And public and private schools have, varying degrees of emergency supplies on hand. There are plans in place. There's some other things I don't want to give away too much in this talk before we dive into the panel, but thinking through emergency contacts, and there's information that each of these entities should have on hand about your kids so that if someone shows up to pick them up, we know who we're handing them off to, right? So if it's not you, it's someone that's on that approved top 10 list, as we're calling it. And so within that 48-hour window, we are also setting up the Child Reunification Center here at the high school so that any child that has not been picked up has somewhere to go. And so the idea is at that 49-hour plus mark, representatives from each school or each one of those daycares or after-school programs are making their way here so that whatever number of kids are unclaimed, if you will, we're then checking in here. And we have worked specifically with each of these schools and each of these programs to say, we want to make sure that there are at least one, if not more, members of your staff that are staying with those kids that have not been picked up. So we do have background checked, credentialed volunteers that will help supplement, but we also want to make sure that there are people that your kids know that are staying and working at the Child Reunification Center. So it's not just a whole bunch of strangers. I mean, we understand this is going to be a very challenging time, a very difficult time, and so we want to make sure that there's some familiarity. We also have volunteers that are a part of our Medical Reserve Corps, that are a part of our psychological first aid team, that are a part of our community emergency response team to kind of round out the support for the activation of the Child Reunification Center. And so the idea is, then at that point, day 3, day 4, day 10, whatever it is, like every kid that is left is going to be here and will be taken care of. And so we have the ability to continue to take care of them until you or another parent or guardian can come and pick them up. So you're stuck in Seattle, you're out of town, whatever that looks like, we really have no idea how many kids that's going to be. And so that's part of our planning challenge, but we're doing what we can to have all of these processes in place so that we are ready to activate when needed. Anything else I have missed from the panel on our 72-hour plan? I know we have a bunch of questions we're going to get into. Okay, all right, so I'm going to hand it over to Kari.
So when you walked in, and we'll get something up to you guys when you just came in, so you got a purple patch or folder that had a bunch of information in it. Please take the time to look at it when you have some time to look at it. I mean, this is a difficult subject to talk about. It's not something we want to talk about, but we have to talk about it, right? This is not a plan that was put together overnight. This has been started in 2016, and it has, I don't even know how many versions we've been through it. And it will continue to evolve as we learn new things, as we're looking at best practices from other communities. So I'm going to start asking some questions, and then hopefully you guys have some questions too. So this first question is for Megan. So how do we talk to our kids about disasters?
So I would like to just start by saying that when I first began doing this, one thing that I've changed in my mind, and you've heard Ann saying this and Scott and Kari, is that nobody's saying if the earthquake comes, they're all saying when the earthquake comes. And that's a real mind change for a lot of people. And it was a big mind change for me to really understand that this is going to happen to our island. Another thing that I like to tell the kids at my school when we talk about this is that we are, I don't know if this is true, the best prepared little town in this country. And they think that's really wonderful, and it's great to use that as a way to bring your kids in as part of the planning process. So when you talk to them about the earthquake, of course it depends on their age, and you know your kids or your grandkids better than anybody else. So with the youngest children, you want to keep it very real and very simple, and answer only the questions that they might ask. But one thing to do is to start preparing for it as a good way to bring them in the process. So you might even say, I went to a meeting today and it was all about preparing for an earthquake, and here's some things we need to do to want to help, and then see what their questions are after that. Of course, the elementary kids are going to start to have more questions. They might want to know, what is an earthquake and why does it happen? All of those kind of questions that you can answer specifically the question that they ask, and don't elaborate, but kind of keep it simple. I like to use the analogy of when the power goes out, because the power goes out here and kids have all been a part of the power going out. So we can say, like when the power goes out, we need to be ready for that. We need to have some food ready, and we need to have some water ready, and have some ideas like that that you can pull them in on. It's really great to involve your elementary kids or older, of course, in this process, the emergency reunification plan that stays at your house. And you can all sit down together and decide, wow, if an earthquake happened, where would we go in our house to be safe? Could we all fit underneath the dining room table? Let's try. And little things like that that will help them realize that they're part of the plan and that they have some power and that they can help out. I think one of the important things about talking to older children, middle school and high school, is they really need to know that there will be absolutely no cell service. And that's something that is going to really change the way that we communicate, and another reason that we have to have a plan. I'll look at my notes and see what I forgot. I've read a few books that have been really helpful, especially for elementary kids. There's an I Survive series out there. I Survived the Alaskan Earthquake. We read aloud in our elementary classrooms, and the children enjoyed the story and wanted to read about the facts at the end. So it was a way that is a nice story about someone who went through an earthquake. They were reunited with their family, there were people there, but then they wanted to know some more details about the Alaskan earthquake. And the main thing that I think is important to tell the children of any age is that there are a lot of people on this island who are all working together, and the whole point is that we're here to make sure that we're ready and that we're going to keep them safe. And it's a good thing to reassure parents of that, but also to let the kids know that is, there are a lot of people here who are ready for this to happen and that everyone will be safe. Okay. There's a nice handout in your folder too that talks about this more specifically of different ways to talk to children of different ages.
Thanks, Megan. So you're going to hear a lot of lingo. And the first thing you're going to want, you've probably heard, is the Family Emergency Reunification Plan. You have this in your folder. This is where you decide to make your kids' favorite dinner, and you sit down and you have a conversation about, where will we meet? Who should you call? Who are you comfortable with? Who are the local folks that you could pick your kids up? And from this, we're going to go to the top 10 list. Have you all heard of the top 10 list before? Okay. Or the ABC. That's, I think, what BISD calls it. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Dane because he's going to fill you in.
All right. So, yes, what Kari was referring to is our ABC process. So every spring, the school district releases and opens the ABC process, which is really an opportunity not just to enroll students, but to update your family and students' information in our Skyward system. If anybody's familiar with Skyward, it's kind of a utilitarian, not so easy on the eyes platform, but it does work. And so the top 10 list is really your emergency contact list in terms of your children and being able to be picked up by someone who is not you. Throughout the process, we ask that you list 2 medical emergency contacts, and usually what we see for the top 10 is that is you just have duplicated the two emergency contacts, but we provide a room for many more contacts. And oftentimes what we also see is families will be entering their two emergency medical contacts, and then maybe an older sibling who's across the water at college, and an aunt in Oregon. And in terms of disaster planning, this is not going to work very well, especially after a post-earthquake. So what we would like to see and what we would advise is that you're entering people within the community and on the island who you're comfortable with picking up your students after a disaster. And we want to make sure that your students are aware of that, the people you're putting on the list are aware of that, and that you've also had a discussion with them that their emergency planning, food storage, first aid, things like that, involve the potential of your family member, your child. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's kind of a brief overview. And I think we saw no hands as being familiar with that emergency form. It's always in the ABC process. And again, you have 10 potential contacts that you can list.
2 quick notes on that. If you have a kiddo, say, south side of the island of Blakely, and your best friend lives next to Glendale Reserve, way up north, that's not a good friend to put on your top 10 list. Because that post-earthquake, when there's elevation change in our roads, there's a kajillion trees and power lines down, that's going to be a very difficult journey to ask your best friend to get from all the way from the north side of the island to the south side. Instead, pick friends that are still trustworthy but that live close to your child's school. Or pick your own immediate neighbors that you might have discovered through our Map the Neighborhood program so that they can retrieve that kiddo, even if it's a long way, to bring them back to your neighborhood, to their home, even if you're not there, for a source of comfort. The other item is this family reunification guide. We're talking about it in the context of little kiddos, but it's also useful if you have elderly parents that live with you. Same deal. Calm conversation over a meal using non-scary language that can be made age appropriate for a beloved elder that's living with you.
Great advice. I know when my kids were in the school district, there was this little box that said, my kid can go home with whoever they're comfortable with. If that's still there, please don't click that. Because when something like this happens, we need ID. I mean, we're taking care of your children very, very seriously. And we're not just going to release them to anybody. We want to make sure that these are people that you vetted, that you're comfortable with, that your child is comfortable with, and that can prove who they are before we're ever going to think about letting them go out of the school or out of the CRC.
And it is still there, just so everyone's aware.
Okay. Corinne, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how our team, the CRC, is going to support kids.
I'm really loud anyway, but yeah, you can hear me. I'll also add to this top 10 list. If you pick someone, because I think we all have that friend who's so reliable, they're always in the islands, we put them on that list, but make sure they don't have 8 other kids who all also put that person on their list. I think that also happens because, in small emergencies that are isolated to your family, they're going to get your kid, but they can't take the minivan full of other people's children home. But we were just talking about, I have that person is on my list right now, I have to update mine. So anyway, helping, in the immediate disaster when something happens, obviously our school personnel, wherever they are, our coaches, they are going to be in charge of your kid for those 48 hours. And that's for 2 reasons. One, we have to activate all these centers. And they have to get the CRC ready, but also it gives that 48 hours because your kid is where you left them, and so it gives you a chance, or your people, to come and get your child and bring them back. And they're with people who are currently know your child, can take care of them, and that's where their comfort is. And then at that 49th hour, that 3rd day is when they start making their way towards the center. And as Anne mentioned, it's going to be fully staffed with very vetted people that are trained to kind of cover, to cover all of those, medical first aid. We're going to have psychological first aid. We're going to have people who can provide childcare. The hope is that we're going to have it built out so that there's someone from every school and every, sports and recreation group that can stay on site at least in the short term, so that they have that familiarity, so that as it starts going, there's someone there that they're familiar with. What am I missing? And you hit so much of the points before. No, you're good. So I think it's just, yeah, I think that's it.
One of the primary reasons why we're telescoping the younger kids here to the high school campus is to relieve the school districts and their staff. So if you can imagine, post-earthquake, your child's teacher has other kiddos besides the ones in their room that they might be concerned with, or other loved ones that they live with. So we're already asking them to stay for their school duties for those first 48 hours. So a large part of what we're giving them, the schools in general, is a bit of a break. So each school is asked to keep somebody on site so that when you do come pick up your child, you can talk to a staffer or a principal or a vice principal. But it's also going to let those people cycle their staff home to sleep and to rest and to check on their own loved ones.
Really good point. Thanks, Kareem and Scott. Let's talk real quick. How do you prepare your kiddos and your family, and then we'll expand into the neighborhood and then into the whole community? So you have a little postcard in your folder, and we came up with this really cool acronym. I work for Girl Scouts. We have lots and lots of acronyms. So the acronym is PREPARE, but the first thing is to plan for your family and neighbors, and that's kind of what having this reunification plan, having that top 10. I would say the next step for you would be to do the Map Your Neighborhood program, which is an excellent way to get to know your neighbors. Scott always says, well, you have everybody over for a glass of wine and some cheese, and you have a conversation. Well, in our neighborhood, we do a 4th of July thing, and everybody comes out and we have a potluck, and that's how we get to know them. Because when you know them now, then you know them when the earth shakes. Having your top 10 list, expanding your emergency contact list, and then preparing your kits. You need a kit for your car. If you work off island, you need a kit at work. You need a kit at home, and then you need a kit for your kids. Everyone will get one of these if you haven't already. And there's not that much that goes into this kit. We're asking them to have a water pouch, a protein bar or a snack, being mindful of food allergies, please no peanuts, a small first aid kit, an emergency blanket, a small flashlight or glow stick, a surgical mask, and of course a copy of the top 10 list. And this fits beautifully in a quart-sized bag. If you want to go to the dollar store and fill it out, you can buy the super deluxe Cadillac version if you wish. But it just sits in the bottom of their backpacks. I know when I was teaching, we had a weird storm hit in the middle of the day, and the kids were getting on the bus at 3 o'clock to go home, and it was like a blizzard, and the snow was piling up, and kids were stuck on the bus for a really long time. And this would have been really helpful to have a snack, water, a glow stick because it was dark. So I really highly recommend that you do that. The next thing is to announce it. Tell everybody what your plan is. And then evaluate it every year. And my family does this when the day after Thanksgiving, when we're putting up the Christmas decorations. That's when my family, all my kids, and they're grown, they come over and we talk about, how are your preps? Do you need more water? Do you need more food? How are you doing in light? Can you cook if the power goes out? All those cool questions. One of the things that I think we are also very interested in is how are our kids going to get from all of these places to here when the roads are kind of bumpy or there's been elevation shifts. We're really fortunate on this island. There is a trail going everywhere, and there's a map in your folders of all the trails that can get kids from where they are in school or soccer or hockey to the CRC. And this is what our schools and the daycares are going to be using to transport kids. Okay. Megan, can you address what happens if you're off island when the earth shakes?
So, if you are at Costco in Silverdale and the earthquake happens, our expectation is that the Agate Crest Bridge will go down and all of the ferries will stop. So that's something that brings back the need for your top 10 list again, because it doesn't matter if you're usually here. If you just happen to run to Fallsbrook or something and this happens, you're going to be at a minimum 3 days, minimum.
From
Probably more like 7. The UW, University of Washington scientists, the seismologists, world-class brainiacs just across the water from us. Great new science, but one of the things that they've learned most recently is the Setch effect, the bathtub effect, which is going to be going between our island and downtown Seattle back and forth. And it's kind of like whenever these kiddos get in a bathtub, you leave the bathtub from it, or the bathroom, and you come back and there's water everywhere. It's because the kiddos have been going back and forth and the water gets higher and higher. That happens in Puget Sound as well. What we've been told by the Coast Guard is they're not even going to send out the Coast Guard boats for several days to check the status of the water because it's going to be that dangerous. And we certainly aren't going to release our flotilla that we have assembled until Coast Guard gives us the green light. So it's more like a matter of a week or more that you will not be getting back onto this island, which is another reason why on that family reunification guide you'll see there's the plan. There's 2 places we want you to have a plan. One on Kitsap County side and one on King County side. You need to have a place that you can shelter for a week before you're going to see our flotilla start making the rounds or find other ways to get back onto the island.
And the only other thing I would add to this is the importance of having to go back in your car too. If you take medication, you need to have that available in your car. You need to have clothing. And it has been recommended to me by people who've been through hurricanes and other things that you also have cash on hand because ATMs and credit cards are not necessarily going to be working. So make sure you have a top 10 list because it could be as simple as being across the bridge for some shopping when this happens and it will be a while before you can get back.
Thanks. And the last question I have before we open up the floor is, what resources are available for developing a family reunification plan or getting prepared?
All right, thank you for asking. So we, through our Bainbridge Prepares partnership, have a number of resources that are available to the community to help you be prepared. In your packet, there's a couple of fun things that we put together. There's the Are You Bainbridge Prepared assessment. And so you could go through and answer these questions honestly. Don't cheat. You want to know where are you really at. So we're asking questions about your level of preparedness. How much food do you have at home? How much water do you have at home? Do you have an emergency kit in your car, in your kids' backpacks, at work? And just thinking through each of these components. And once you have your score, you'll know, all right, we're doing okay, or oh crap, we have some work to do. And so in that vein, this year we put together a Prepare in a Year challenge, and it's based off of the Washington State Prepare in a Year booklet, which is also in your packet. And so each month there's a theme and a challenge. And so if you complete the challenge and you submit the paperwork online, you're eligible to win a prize. March, the focus is on water, and we actually have a number of members of our water team are here. Raise your hands. I know you're happy to chat about water to folks that are in the audience today. And the idea is we understand that preparedness can be overwhelming, and everything that we do is through, Scott calls it through a lens of love and not fear. We're not up here talking to you about this to scare you into action. We really want you to see that we're doing this because we care about the community, we care about you and your kids and our schools and everyone that spends time on Bainbridge Island. And so we're trying to provide resources that help make preparing a little bit more manageable. So if month by month you focus on each of these themes and go through these tasks, then you're able to put together the things that you need so that you have written plans in place. You've talked with your family members about what that plan is, and then you have the food and water prescriptions and other emergency supplies that you need to be prepared when the earthquake happens or when the wildfire or extended power outage or whatever it is. I mean, earthquake really is the worst case scenario in terms of the length of time for recovery. And so if you're planning for that month of emergency supplies, but we're only out of power for 3 days, well, great. You're kind of prepared for everything else. So that's part of why, as Scott mentioned, all of these plans were focused on earthquake, but hey, they sure helped us out during the pandemic. We wouldn't have been able to put on 88 vaccine clinics with the help of all of our volunteers if we didn't have this. We would have been relying on Kitsap County or sending folks elsewhere when we were really able to rally together and help our community and people, way beyond during the pandemic. So there's a lot of resources. There's a lot of great information online. My office is always open, so if you have specific questions, let me know. We have, 30 different teams working on various aspects of preparedness as well. So we have a lot of really incredible volunteers that are subject matter experts on a lot of these different issues. Yes, thank you. So the other component I definitely don't want to not mention today is Map Your Neighborhood. So about 50% of the island has actually gone through Map Your Neighborhood. And what Kari mentioned is, this is what we call kind of preparedness through parties. So if you're not in a mapped neighborhood, you post to your neighbors. We have a whole bunch of great trainers that will come out and walk you through this Map Your Neighborhood process. We put together a map of your neighborhood. We put together a contact list and a household inventory so that you know, all right, my next door neighbor has a chainsaw, the neighbor down the street has the whole house generator, we know who's a doctor, who's a veterinarian, who's a structural engineer, and so you have that skills assessment and understanding of the assets, and then you also know, all right, my other neighbor works in Seattle 5 days a week, and so we know that they're gonna need help getting their kids from school, or they have a whole bunch of pets, or whatever that looks like. And so we're able to have that neighborhood resilience, and Map Your Neighborhood really is the foundation, aside from personal preparedness. If you're prepared at home and you're prepared in your neighborhood, then you're resilient, you're ready to go. And so that's less people that we're gonna need to provide additional support for at those disaster hubs and at the CRC. Okay, one more thing, I'm being prompted. If you have not signed up for Nixle, raise your hands if you are. Hopefully it's everyone. Okay, great, that's most of you. So Nixle is our community mass notification system, and it's the way that oftentimes the messages are coming actually directly from me or someone in our public works department or our police department. So we're able to share with you information on road closures, any safety concerns, public health threats, water quality issues. So if you text our zip code 98110 to 888-777, you will sign up and get those text messages. If you have teenagers in your home that also have cell phones, make sure they're signed up for Nixle. So there's information on this little postcard. You can also add your email. You can download the Everbridge app so you can get push notifications as well. So this is our way of notifying you. And right now we have around 13,000 subscribers. So we have a pretty good subscriber rate, but we really want everyone that lives and works and spends time on Bainbridge to be signed up for that.
Awesome. One other thing, Anne mentioned BainbridgePrepares.com. It's an org. Sorry, I had that happen when I was first got on the net. I went to whitehouse.com. Not a good website. Anyways, BainbridgePrepares.org. There's a ton of really great information about where you can get things on the island, who you can talk to, what the teams are, who the team leads are. If you have a skill set, we'd love to engage you in this work. It's really fulfilling, and it's been an amazing way to get to know your community. So we've done a lot of talking. How many of you have questions for us? Do you want to step up to the mic here? We are recording, so we want to make sure that we get these messages.
Thank you. This was fantastic. My name is Jill Anderson, and I live down the street. So my first question is, how is the city determining the risk in terms of percent likelihood in the next decade or 20 years? I know we can't tell, but the city of Seattle had come up with some planning for some of the building deficiencies that they have, and so I'm curious what we're looking at.
Okay. So that's a really good question. I mean, earthquake science is changing all the time, and so all I can tell you is that every stat out there just says we are overdue. So I can't give you a firm answer on that, other than we wholeheartedly believe that it is a matter of when and not if, and that's why we're doing this planning. I think the most important thing that we can all do is just to take steps to be prepared. There are certain, not to get too technical, but there are certain years for houses where different building codes were in place. So if you live in an unreinforced masonry building, or you live in a home that was built prior to 1974, there are things that you can do to make sure you're retrofitting your home. And there are, current building codes are so much better than they were. Now, luckily on Bainbridge, the numbers in terms of the percentage of homes that FEMA estimates will be what we call red tagged or extremely damaged and unlivable is much lower than other areas. But with that information, the building code information is available online. But in terms of the true risk and the true vulnerability, there's not a hard stat that I can give you, other than we are hundreds of years overdue.
Okay. I do have a follow-up question. So if a child's at a school that cannot be accessed, what will you do in that immediate 24 hours?
Yeah, so we have volunteers spread throughout the island. And so one of the things we're going to be focusing even more on is kind of mapping out all of those volunteers so that we have someone kind of assigned to check in, not only to those disaster hubs, but at each school, so that we're doing that post-earthquake damage assessment so we can understand Blakely is not accessible, or this other school or this daycare is not accessible. And we didn't really talk about the technology component, but we actually have a member of our digital tech ops team. Rakesh is here in the audience. So one of the things that we're working hard on is to have ham radio operators assigned all across the island, and we're trying to build out a mesh network using Starlink satellite internet so that we actually have means to communicate. So when that cell phone infrastructure goes down, we have the ability to still understand what's going on. And another reason why it's important to know where those disaster hubs are located is if you go, you can get information. So we will have fairly real-time information from all across the island. So we understand what that damage assessment is. We understand what those schools look like. So we will be able to at least provide that information, and then we can assign different resources to go and try and help. If it's because the road's inaccessible, then obviously we're gonna have a lot more kids we're trying to get to the CRC, or if the infrastructure is more challenging, then we can assign our public works department, our fire department, et cetera, to help figure out what we need to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you have other questions, just please come forward.
Hi, my question is about transportation by foot between disaster hubs and schools the first 48 hours and after. There's potential for aftershocks. There's a potential for liquefaction, especially on the coast. Possible sinkholes, electrical wires flinging in the air, fires, glass. So my thought is, if I had kids in school, which I do, I would walk to get them, along with anybody else that was on my list. So any thoughts about walking the trails and aftershocks?
Okay. Yeah, I think those are all really good points. So one, of course, for you to take in your own kind of damage assessment and hazard assessment and what we call situational awareness as you're trying to get where you're going. I think our assumption is that vehicle transport won't really be an option. And so if you have a cargo bike or an electric bike or a golf cart even, we want to make sure that we're using different modes of transport and just being safe as you go. There's so many unknowns that I can't guarantee, that this trail will be open or this street will be safe, but we want to give you options. And so that's part of why we have the trail map. There absolutely could be down trees or down power lines. And so we want to make sure that we are doing what we can to just be aware as you're going out. Part of the Map Your Neighborhood network is to have resources like chainsaws so that we are able to do clearing and debris removal as we can. So that's a part of within each neighborhood we want to have happen. The other part that we are trying to better focus in on is assigning nearby mapped neighborhoods to each school. And so we're able to have the nearby mapped neighborhood captains go and check on the school and kind of help clear routes and things. I mean, we're a small island, but we also have the road infrastructure of a county, and so our public works department can't do it on their own, and so that's where part of the information coming in will help us make those decisions, so we can also prioritize additional city and volunteer resource to help try and create that clearance.
And any specific information about potential speculation of aftershocks?
Yeah, there will be aftershocks. There'll be the increase before the decrease. Science doesn't know how many there will be or what the duration will be, just that we will have those. So similar to the such effect, where we're not going to be getting out on the Puget Sound anytime soon, the hours post-earthquake also have to take into account aftershocks. The thing that Ann was talking about getting the kiddos from point A to point B, say on the third day, the telescoping day. The reason why Map Your Neighborhood is such a foundational thing for everything we've built over the last decade is this is about neighbors taking care of neighbors and citizens taking care of citizens, because our government officials are overwhelmed and the first responders are overwhelmed. So another example would be if it's warmer months and we've got a school full of kiddos and they're all wearing sandals, one of the things that the neighborhood that surround them can do is bring in better footwear before the kids need to telescope into the high school campus on day 3. So it's neighbors bringing in additional supplies to their local school. The other thing is that before we bring kids from point A to point B, say from Blakely down south up to the high school here in the middle of the island, we'll have all the other volunteers that will have walked that exact path. So we sat with the police department years ago, and Kari and I and a couple of folks did this to ask, how do we securely transport a group of minors? 2 adults in front, 2 adults in back, and pre-look at your pathway. So that pathway will know, is there a sinkhole we need to walk around? Are there power lines that have still not been disconnected that we need to avoid? So we'll have to map out a safe pathway. Good questions, thank you. Yes, Rakesh. Oh, let's go right here first, because you're near the microphone. And then Rakesh, come on down to the microphone when you're ready.
Hi, my name is Maggie Kaiser. I have a daughter, a 3-year-old, at Island Cooperative Preschool behind Seybolt Church. And I'm trying to envision 14 2- to 3-year-olds marching from Seybolt to the high school. And I don't really see it happening, so like I'm on the board of our preschool as well. I'm wondering if it's very specific, but like for example, these smaller private preschools and daycares that are further away from the kids hub. Do we have the right to keep the kids at Seybolt Church Hub, which is on the same property, past 48 hours?
Thank you, that's a great question. So I mean, hopefully some of those kids are picked up within those first 48 hours. So it's not all of them trying to come down. One thing that we encourage, especially our daycares to have on hand, are like the little cargo, what do you call them? Like a wagon, right? So there's like off-road wagons where you can put multiple kids in, and so that's one way that makes it a little bit easier to transport. Certainly within each disaster, we have the ability to make on-the-fly decisions. And so if we know that the road infrastructure is way worse and the trail infrastructure is way worse than we ever imagined, and maybe it does make better sense to keep the kids at Seybolt, we can do that. We wanted to have a plan that made sense to help us, put resources in one place, make sure we have background check credentialed volunteers, that are, approved to work with kids, but that doesn't mean that there's no flex in our plan. An old boss of mine gave me a little Gumby figure. It says, Semper Gumby, always flexible, and so in emergency management, we like to think that a lot of our plans are just that. So it absolutely might make sense, real time, and through our network of volunteers and our ham radio connection, we would know that. So we would be able to say, okay, there's 10 kids left at Island Co-op, and we're gonna just continue to co-locate them with the Seybolt Hub, and that's perfectly fine. And so, we're doing what we can, what we think makes sense for probably 90% of the scenario, and then the other 10 will flex and we'll be able to have that real-time information.
Just one more question while I'm up here. For these smaller schools, less than 100 students, for example, or childcare or informal daycare centers, what can we do as a school community to prepare our school for that, especially with kids under 5?
I would bet that your head of school has already got a plan. But we have schools around the island that have really great plans in place, and we would be happy, Megan would happy to come and talk to your crew. I can come up and talk to your crew. I mean, think about what your kids are going to need without you for 2 weeks. Diapers, wipes, that sort of thing. That will all be here, but if we can't get them there, you're going to want to be able to bring stuff to the place, wherever that might be. So yeah.
So Kari over the years has worked with literally every head of school, private and public. And one of the things that a concerned parent, the best thing you could do would be to talk to that head of school, talk to that principal, and just say, I hear you, and I know you've been working on this, and I'd love to help. Or I'd love to hear what the plan is, or I'd love to help you spread it through the PTO, or I'd love to bring it up at the next board meeting. Because they've worked on it. Megan's worked on hers for Montessori Country School for years. But it's probably not that often that she has one of the parents at MCS ask her about it. So give them the opportunity to share with them all the hard work that they've done. Good question, thank you.
Can I also add, and Megan might have this one, to also talk to your friends and those, in addition to talking to the head of your school or the PTO or whatever, it's really important to start talking to your friends and your kids' parents about all of this going on. Because I think for every person that hears it, there's so many parents that are kind of avoiding facing this reality. I think I'm definitely one of them. I'm from the Midwest. I know everything about a tornado. I can tell you everywhere to go and every building I've ever been in, but earthquakes and a disaster of this magnitude is very new to me and my lived experience. And I think the more that we can start talking to those in our social networks and say like, hey, would you have a plan? Who's on your list? I just went to this thing. Just the same way we're going to talk to our kids later and say, I went to this town hall and I learned all these things. Making sure that everyone around us, because it is that, the goal is that no one ends up at the CRC. It's not likely, but that's the goal, is that within those first 48 hours, everyone's plan works and someone is reliable on that list that's able to get that child, bring them back to whatever the plan is so that the CRC is handling a very small group of kids. And I think that really starts with us and making sure that we're sharing that. We're asking our child's sports teams, saying, hey, what's your plan? Oh, you don't have one? Can I help you make one? And thinking of all the different places that your kid might be throughout the year, throughout the day, and making sure that we're all being part of that solution. So I think it is. It's like, it's not just gonna, like the schools they're all doing their part, but I think the more that we all know what our part is, the easier this is all gonna roll out when it happens.
Hi, I'm asking this in my capacity as a parent rather than Bainbridge Prepares. Can you touch on, obviously it makes a lot of sense that you're planning around an earthquake scenario, but that is just one of multiple hazards that may exist here. Can any of you touch on the other possible scenarios that where, like this, where we may need to adapt for other scenarios. I'm thinking about like fires or storms or other types of events. And to what extent is this plan relevant to those kind of other scenarios? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll touch on that, and then I'll actually let Dane talk a little bit about some of the other work we've done with the school district. So certainly, as we mentioned, this is very focused on earthquake, but it could also be for wildfire. If there's a scenario in which we have to evacuate a school or, you know, a portion of the island, we would be setting up a child reunification center somewhere else. It wouldn't necessarily be here. It could be off island. It really depends. I mean, wildfire in particular is tricky because there's even more unknowns in terms of geography. And so, but the pieces of this plan still work for that. So we've had conversation with Kitsap County Department of Emergency Management and with Suquamish Emergency Management to say if we need to set up a child reunification center somewhere right off island, could we do that and what would that look like? And so it would be using, you know, school buses to evacuate the area that we need to, get kids where we need to get them checked in, and then we would notify the parent community, okay, your kids are safe, they're here, come and get them. So that could apply in, you know, the word that none of us want to use, an active assailant, active shooter type situation. It could be wildfire, it could be some other bizarre power outage, you know, some reason why it wasn't safe for you to come directly to the school or to the daycare where they're at. So there are a number of other scenarios where this would make sense. You know, the purpose of today was not to talk specifically about active assailant, active shooter, but I do want to give Dane the opportunity to talk about some of the work that we have done in partnership with the police department and the fire district as well.
Yeah, so we've actually done a lot of work over the years, and in terms of facility usage, we have plans internally to use some of our facilities as backup facilities too. I think Sakine would serve as, you know, and also a disaster hub in case one's not available. And then in terms of wildfire, you know, I can't really speak to tsunami or anything like that, but in terms of wildfire, you know, the school district has its own bus fleet, right? And, you know, upon the fire starting, et cetera, you know, we have this infrastructure, this ability to move large numbers of people on the island very quickly, assuming that some pathway for the road is still open. And so we've made those plans. They're a little preliminary, but they're also useful. And we would be able to do that. We'd be able to move our kids. We'd be able to talk with Megan, the island school, and others and say, do you need transportation elsewhere? Can we get you to high ground? Can we get you to a facility that doesn't have a massive amount of vegetation right directly around it, you know, such as this high school campus, right? So those are the plans that we've been making and talking about.
Sorry, I'll add one thing. Part of the reason that Scott went back to this slide is that 911 availability column. I basically would also think about it this way, is ability to communicate. So it's a matter of, in the case of a wildfire or a mass shooter, what Ann was talking about earlier, with NIXL alerts and that sort of thing, we're going to try to keep everybody as informed as possible. And so there's a lot more flexibility there about, don't go here, but you can go here. But in the case of a large earthquake, that communication channel is going to be down. And so that's where we're going to be more flexible, the more we can communicate. So.
Thank you, Lauren. I just remembered one thing. I got hyper-focused there for a second, so I'll go back a little bit. We actually host the police department to do active shooter trainings here in the summertime when the school is empty. And so they do their mock setup in the 200 building where you are now. And we do that active shooter mock-up, and some of my staff and myself actually attend that also. And then annually, the fire department holds a huge first responder event here in the high school campus as well. And it's just about familiarizing them with our buildings, and then us as observers here at the school district familiarizing ourselves with how that may look if something like that occurs.
So while she's making her way down here, I just wanted to, there is another app that you should have on your phone, and it's called Shake Alert, or I think maybe My Shake. And this is something that California, Oregon, and Washington have put in play. It's not going to give us much, 20 seconds maybe, but those P waves that start with one, they will start to trigger the webbing of measuring devices, and that will trigger an alert. So if you don't have Shake Alert on your phone, good thing to do.
Thank you. My name's Angie, and just thinking in terms of, we talked about individually having a plan if we're off island, say, in Silverdale, Costco, but what if our kids are on a field trip off island and they're under the care of the school? Where would we anticipate they would be during that time that they can't get back over? There we go. That's a really good question. So I can't give you a really solid answer on that, other than to say, every community to a certain extent has emergency response plans in place. Now, we are definitely kind of a little bit ahead of the curve, but if your kids are in Seattle and they're stuck in Seattle, Seattle Emergency Management comes into play and will help try and connect them with resources wherever they're stuck, if you will. And so that is true for any community really in Washington State. They would be under the care of that local emergency management program, that local fire department, that local police department. And so just like there are kids stuck here, if there's a sports team from Issaquah that happens to be on the island, well then they're in my charge, they're in my care, and through our partnership. And so we have the ability to communicate through our Emergency Operations Center with other emergency management departments and with the state. And so part of what we will be getting briefings on is, okay, Seattle Emergency Management, just for example, has been notified that there's a group of 80 kids from Bainbridge Island, and they are now in, this shelter, or they're at this location. And so it's not going to happen overnight. There will be, definitely days worth of response and situational awareness that comes into the Emergency Operations Center, but then we'll be able to start making those connections. And so I would imagine we would get a report from our schools to say, hey, we had a field trip over in Seattle or in Sequim or wherever they happen to be when the incident happens. And so part of my job and our Emergency Operations Center is to make those connections. And so all that information that comes into the city, we are then able to follow up. So we have not only our ham radio network, but we have other means with which to communicate with other emergency management programs across the state. So we would do our best to get that information and then obviously provide that back out to you so that you would know it. So that's a really great question. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, great.
I'm just going to shout. We're talking about the Agate Passage Bridge. What about the Hood Canal Bridge? What happens to that?
Hood Canal Bridge. Yeah, so we've talked about the Agate Pass Bridge, but what about Hood Canal? I'll be honest, I have not seen a recent report on Hood Canal. I don't know. I can certainly look it up. I know with Agate Pass, it's a much older build. It's considered functionally obsolete by WashDOT, but that is a great question. I don't know. I will look that up and have that information at the ready for next time.
It's in a very bad tsunami path.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it probably would be underwater if not crumbling. But I would love to actually see a report from WashDOT on that. Other questions? Come on up. I think this mic's the one that's on. Thank you.
I know that you gave us all pouches to put in our kids' backpacks in case of emergency. What does the schools have? Do they have enough supplies to last us 48 hours?
We do. We don't obviously have as much supplies at the moment as we would like. And we did use quite a bit of our supply stash, if you will, during the pandemic, and that's still, some of that needs to be recovered at this point. But generally speaking, every classroom has a supply to get through that 48 hours in it's either both a backpack and a bucket, and or when the the other, right? And then there's some small storage in their cabinet space in their classroom. But usually, we're trying to do at least 5 gallons of water, some food supplies, basic first aid, and then of course, restroom usage. So very basic, but 48-hour applicable. That's just Bainbridge Public Schools.
And I would say the same thing for the private schools, most of them, and would also reiterate Corinne's suggestion to, if you are part of a small preschool or other private school on the island, to offer your help, because it is a big job. But there are notebooks that we've all received about the supplies that we need to have on hand. And it is, my school happens to have a lot of dried food and blankets and water and toileting setups, in addition to emergency tools and radios and things like that that we have stored at the school. And this plan, the purple plan, was originally for 72 hours, so I think most of us have supplies for at least that before we move people also.
Can I ask one more question? The authorized people to pick up your kiddos, how do you communicate that if I show up at school and my kids aren't there, or even wondering where they are, if there's no cell service after that 48 hours, knowing where to go? How does that, is there a way to communicate that?
We don't have a way to communicate it to you before you get to the school. But at Montessori Country School, as an example, we have a triply backed up list. So whoever arrives, we're going to look on our list and we're going to see who you have been okay to take, and we're going to do our best to get you to take anyone that you can. And we have that written down so that when that child's parent does show up, we're going to say, your child went with Corinne. Because we won't have cell service and we're not going to be answering our phones either, then there's no way that we can tell you that ahead of time. But we do have a list of who we would have sent your child home with and at what time.
And for the public schools, the same. So every year after the ABC process closes, our office managers at every school will print those emergency release forms, and they keep them in a clipboard as part of their incident command system. And so as children are reunited or united with somebody on the list, they track that and they're checking ID and they're recording that. So if you do show up, we can at least tell you who they went with at that point.
I think there might be one other question. If so, come on down to the microphone. And while you're on your way down, one more answer to your question. It's great for parents to then ask their schools, how can I help? So if it's a private school, ask the board folks, hey, for the shed of gear that you have for those first 48 hours, how can I help? Can I be part of the team that cracks it open once a year to ensure everything's fresh? If it's part of the public school, approach the PTO. We've presented to all of the PTOs numerous times over the years, so contact the PTO and tell them, I want to be part of the team that helps. When's the last time you guys cracked open the shed, behind the elementary school? Yes, sir.
My name's Anthony Farrell, and I've been a resident of Bainbridge Island here since '89, and I have experienced firsthand being in an earthquake situation back in '92. I happened to be in Seattle at the time. Everything was great. All the planning was wonderful. This is really a comment more than a question. My comment is this. If you have the power, electricity, the cell towers working, everything's great. You're able to get the communications out. You're able to get the people here to get their children. You're able to get them in certain safe places to be while this is going on. The infrastructure stays pretty much intact. The problem I see sometimes is if that goes out, then there's a lot of problems. I'll give you a good example. I was in Seattle. I'm a corrections officer in Seattle.
Can I ask a quick clarification question?
Yes.
When you say when that goes out, do you mean the electricity and telecommunications?
The power goes out.
Okay, yeah.
The power goes out into buildings, and you have no communication except for the police department only has from radio to squad car to squad car. They don't always have communication with the building, the sitcom, because the towers are down.
We have two systems that are backup,
Okay.
and including Rakesh, who is that team lead. I think he might still be here. Rakesh, wave your hand. So the two systems, sir, are, one is ham radio. We are blessed on this island to be rich with ham radio operators. So we've got ham radios at the police station, the Emergency Operations Center, all the fire stations, every one of our disaster hubs, and the Child Reunification Center. Then there's a secondary backup that we're building out now, which is Starlink, which has been a game changer in terms of portable Starlinks that we've been buying that we can locate. So we're going directly to a satellite. So unless it's an EMP, that does not get interrupted. And each of those locations has backup electricity. So we're able to keep the communications flowing. So Anne, who I think I call her the grand poobah, she'll post-earthquake, she's the grand poobah running everything.
Okay.
She has got relatively instant communication from all of those locations.
Okay, it's fine, it's very good. The other problem I see is the general public doesn't have a ham radio, doesn't have the ability to connect with the people who have the ability to communicate with each other, and they have to get the word out. Other problems I find is that when parents start to react to what's going on, they want to get out there and they want to get a hold of their children right away. Then you have thousands of people in their cars rushing all over town, looking to find out where their kids are. And they know they're at the schools, and then what happens is you have these huge, large traffic jams all through the...
So let's take those issues one at a time. The first one, in terms of communications out in the neighborhoods, street by street, that's a core part of our Map Your Neighborhood program, is to actually encourage ham radio operators there. We have a backup system of when the neighborhoods, the Map Your Neighborhood captains can walk to the closest hub. Each of the hubs where there is ham radio has big sheets of melamine whiteboards on the outside that will be posted, where they'll be posting information. So then that Map Your Neighborhood captain can walk back to the street and say, tell the neighbors, here's what's going on the island, real-time, qualified information. But frankly, we have so many hams around the island that we're increasingly finding hams at every single neighborhood, even to save that walk.
I realize that, but you have to remember the emotions of the people who are involved in that trauma of the event. What happens to them is they can listen to the guy with the ham radio saying, well, you can't go to school right now, there's too many people there, you can go there. That doesn't always work out. Here's another problem. What I experience is when you're in a large area and there's a lot of people there, they all want to move. They want to get out of that area because to them, it's a dangerous area. So what happened in downtown Seattle was you had...
I'm going to actually cut you off there for the Seattle story is useful, but I'd like to address your previous issues first.
Sure.
Let's go back to the traffic one. Traffic will not become an issue because our roads will not be passable. Folks will barely be able to get out of their own neighborhood, much less get across the island. So we're not anticipating large traffic jams anywhere because they simply won't be able to leave the neighborhoods. The other aspects you brought up of group response to being scared. The brilliance of our Map Your Neighborhood program, it's a flip chart. And it goes through 9 steps, and the 9 steps are color-coded and everything. It's meant for when your brain is full of adrenaline and you're not thinking well, because it's 3 in the morning and the earthquake just happened. And you walk through those 9 steps, and that secures yourself, your loved ones you live with, and your immediate neighbors. And then step 10, what we call your step 10, your civic duty kicks in, and that's where our hub system kicks in, when the Map Your Neighborhood captains have walked to their closest hub, and by that time, our volunteers have walked there. So what we're attempting to do is to say, yes, we know that everybody's going to be upset at first. That's the whole reason we created a psychological first aid team. But if we can break it down into disparate parts, into individual sections, and help people go step by step by step, and that gets them from point A to point B in a calm manner. Did you have another question? Because otherwise,
no,
I want to get to the next question.
It's just that people do react differently to different situations, and you have to remember that all the calmness and all the steps that you might have in place can go in a handbasket very quickly.
Yes, we're well aware. As Ann was saying, Semper Cumby, we plan for flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, next question.
Hi, thanks for doing this. I am a neighborhood captain, and I was wondering what the best way for me to disseminate this information that I have in tree form in this purple folder is to my neighborhood.
Thank you, that's a good question. So we're recording this session, so we will make a link to that recording available. And one of the things that we haven't done, but I think we can do, is maybe put together a PDF of the full packet. And so we can post the, perfect, already on the child safety page. There we go. Okay, so we have these resources already posted on bainbridgeprepares.org, and then we will have the video link I will send out to all of our Map Your Neighborhood captains, and we will have that ready for you. Thank you.
And what about the map in particular? That's like the clearest trail map I've ever seen in Bainbridge Island.
Yeah, I printed it from the city website, so I will make sure that if that's not on there, we'll link that.
If that's not on there, we'll get it. It's brand new. We'll get Sarah to post it on the blog, and then we'll also have it listed. By the way, so the shortcut to Kari's team website is bainbridgeprepares.org/kids. The shortcut to Eric's water team is bainbridgeprepares.org/water. The hubs is /hubs. You can find all those, but each one of those has got a treasure trove of digital information. And thank you for wanting to spread the word digitally. Question? Last question, folks.
I'm an academic captain, and I had a question. Last spring, we focus shifted very dramatically to the scenario of wildfires. And I completely agree about the 9-step plan being, very accessible and a great solution in the case of an earthquake. But if we ourselves and our neighbors are being urged to go out to the edges of the island towards the water, does that just go out the window, or do you have a substitute?
That's a good question. So there isn't really a substitute for the 9-step Map Your Neighborhood process as it stands. However, with that being said, we do have a written wildfire evacuation plan for the island. We do have in our Map Your Neighborhood toolkit, we have sort of the individual steps that you take following following a wildfire versus the earthquake that's available in that toolkit. And so there are resources out there that are really more focused on the individual response. And that is, every incident is different, and every response ends up being a little bit different, which is part of what makes our planning process so challenging. But for wildfire evacuation in particular, understanding your risk, knowing the evacuation routes, talking with your neighbors about it, I don't really anticipate neighborhoods responding together in that same sense, but at the same time having those connections so that if you do get a Nixle alert that says this portion of the island evacuate now, you're at least able to kind of quickly check in with your neighbors and say, hey, did everyone else get this Nixle? We need to leave, and it's telling us where to go. So it's not prescribed in that same 9-step process, but you can certainly use that Map Your Neighborhood network to check in and make sure that everyone's responding.
Okay, so in the materials, I can find the alternate. Well, I'm worried about my own responsibility as a Map Your Neighborhood captain, and because I knew exactly what I needed to do and where I needed to go, but it shifts.
Yeah, I think the Map Your Neighborhood program, the 9 steps are really focused on post-earthquake.
Yeah.
But the sort of individual responsibility for wildfire is in the Map Your Neighborhood toolkit. If you just send me an email and I can make sure that you have that, but it lists out not only for wildfire, but we wrote kind of your neighborhood response to the pandemic, neighborhood response to a tsunami, neighborhood response to a wildfire. And so there are pieces of that, but it's not in that same prescriptive way.
2 suggestions as a captain. Get the neighbors to understand the importance of Nixle and have them sign up on it. And it's fast enough, you can encourage them socially to do it right there in front of you. And then the second is for them to memorize their evacuation zone for both where they live and if they work or spend a lot of time volunteering in some place on the island. If you can get them to do those two things, you will have then equipped them to be able to respond when Ann or the fire chief sends out the note that says evacuate now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, thanks everybody for coming tonight. We really appreciate your interest in what we do. If anyone's interested in getting involved with us, come on down. We'd love to have more people working with us. We're actually now at a point where the team has put together such a fantastic plan that we're now going to start filling out our teams that would be activated. So if that's something you're interested in, please come see me, see Scott, come see Ann. We'd love to start talking to folks. If you know how to cook, you can set up cots, you can play games with kids, you can read books. We need you. And with that, I want to just say, call to action, talk to your kids, get your family ready, get your neighborhood ready, and come be part of the community. And I think that's it. Anything else? Thank you very much, panel. Appreciate it.